Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martin Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Wātea, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora Aotearoa. The true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal, progressive democracy is the 1% richest plus their 9% enablers versus the 90% rest of us. Welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martin Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are Labour Party finance spokesperson Barbara Edmonds, Stuff business journalist Dita Boni, New Zealand Herald columnist Simon Wilson, and we did have the mad dog all lined up. Richard Prebble, ruff, ruff, ruff. But unfortunately, Richard came down quite ill with some bad hiccups, and so he couldn't join us this evening. I provide the space for the right. I do. If they don't take it, what can I do? Roger Douglas was great last week. But we do have his loss. Our gain, however, is we do have Wātea's press gallery journalist Claudette Hauiti joining us this evening. Very excited about that. She had an incredible interview with Luxon that we'll be talking about. Tonight's 1-on-1 and 10 is Moana from Te Aoa with Moana on Māori TV with last night's explosive Winston Peters interview. Shout out to Kiwi Skirt and Chewy from BHN moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to all the Bradbury Easters online watching right now. Your comments will appear on the screen as we go. Shout out to our Wātea, Facebook, Rover and Sky TV whānau. And our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Selwyn and Jamie Daly, and they will be arguing online at Twitter, hashtag the Bradbury Group. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Okay. So, Minister for Handmaidens and Pay Parity Kneecap, Brooke Van Velden, called a press conference this week in the vain hope that by pretending to look like actor doing something meaningful, you'll forget to notice that the economy is melting down thanks to the government 2024 budget amputations. To suggest her press conference was brutal underplays the word brutal. BVV was excited to announce an announcement about an exciting announcement, which actually had the press gallery asking her, Minister, what exactly are you announcing? She wasn't able to explain what she was announcing, what the announcement would do, or when it would get done, but she was most certainly clear that what she was announcing was exciting. At one stage, she demanded that the press gallery publish her statement as a headline to see how excited their readers would be. That bit's not a joke, that actually happened. It wasn't so much a train wreck interview as it was a school bus crashing into a pet store while exploding into a children's hospital. I still don't know what she was announcing, but she's got 4 more of these special exciting announcements to go, which feels to me like 5 too many special announcements. Talking of special announcements, Mātua Winston announced this week a crackdown on immigration, which would be totally on brand for New Zealand First if it wasn't for the fact that while he's denouncing immigration, he's also looking to change the overseas investment limits to help the 215 gold visa multi-millionaires buy New Zealand citizenship. So, immigrants, but yay multi-millionaires buying their way into our country. Glad I understood the moral high ground that Mātua Winston is burning his crosses from. And finally, in this week's War on News, another extreme weather event that has followed multiple other extreme weather events hitting New Zealand right now, causing scarring upon the land, flood damage beyond capacity to repair, all from and a mainstream media who refuse to ask why any of this is happening. It's almost like something is impacting the weather. In totally unrelated news, Environment Canterbury has approved dairy conversions for over 15,000 additional cows in the next 6 months, because no matter what the question is, in New Zealand, the answer is always more cows. Brothers and sisters, we're all going to die on a burning planet thanks to the lies of the petro-industrial complex and their polluter mates. To quote the great Mike Hosking, happy days. The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau, but first this week's 1-on-1 in 10 with Moana from Māori TV's Te Ao with Moana. Kia ora, Moana. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful. Oh, no, I think she's muted. How
am I doing that? What? Me? What? Am I muting? Can you hear me?
We can. Comrade, your interview last night with Winston on Te Ao with Moana was a remarkably aggressive affair where Winston seemed incapable of taking a compliment from you and he only wanted to fight. Is this the polarisation of New Zealand politics?
I think he is he's very clear on what he's doing. What I wanted to do was really unpack some of the contradictions that I see.
Yeah.
And I think all of us see. He is one of the most challenging people to interview because of the special tactics that he employs.
Yes.
It's very, very hard to get an answer out of him. You might have noticed that I asked him about 7 or 8 times about Gaza. But yeah, he's full of contradictions because he's like, there were moments where he was like, yes, this is the most challenging, the toughest geopolitical era that we've ever been in. Every word counts. You have to be careful. And I say to my colleagues, don't think out loud. So, and you see this fantastic statesman, and then he morphs into this, well, he is a dickhead, kind of a thing. He talks about how we need targeted funding, or where there's need, we need to put funding into it. And he does it. He does it for Māori Women's Welfare League and for Māori Wardens, but he disagrees that it needs to be in there for health. So there was just so many contradictions that I, was trying to unpack there. And I think that, it was quite a challenging exercise, that.
Were you surprised with how aggressive he became during the interview?
Well, it's funny because when I walked in, I would say that we have a warm kind of kia ora, how are you, how's things? So-and-so says hi. And then as soon as the cameras went on, I went, kia ora. He's like, kia ora.
Oh, right.
Just like that.
Yeah.
But then there's moments where it's kind of like he's sort of acting sometimes and he's playing to his audience. There's those parts where he does it's almost like one of those stump speeches and there's only one party and we're going to take it back and that's New Zealand first. And, it takes all of me to, not go, bravo, you got it in there, you did, But he also employs that tactic, which is trying to make it have viewers think that just by a reporter asking a question, you're challenging their integrity, you're challenging their principles, you're biased, you're just by asking the question, which I think is a really a populist and terrible trend.
You compared his careful selection of words when he is being our top diplomat, and then you lined that up with the language that he uses on the domestic front. Did that contrast make him pause when you actually put it to him that way?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, he just kind of like, because he sort of says things like, and that's how we got into that conversation, because he's talking about like discipline. We need discipline, blah, blah, blah. Then that's when I said, but you said this, and he's like, he didn't really pause that much on that particular one. I think he's got his set pieces and they are, I thought it was kind of revealing in just the some of the things that he plays with, it's quite challenging.
How can he go from attacking immigrants on the one hand while changing the overseas investment rules with the other hand? Do New Zealand First supporters care about that hypocrisy?
I think people aren't really aware of that particular amendment that's been proposed, and the fact that the onus will go on the government to have to prove within about 15 days that a particular investment does not meet national interests, as opposed to the flip before. And from what little I know about it, there are potential repercussions there, not just constitutional, but also real life impact in terms of forestry investment, the kind of environmental stuff. So, but the way that it gets framed sometimes is always around the economics. There'll be employment for people. I tell you, the bit that I was quite shocked on was when I talked about, how many people are taken off overseas. And then he framed it as an overseas experience.
Yeah, I was really surprised that he tried to downplay that as much as he did. You challenged him on some of the terrible things he has said, and he refused to acknowledge that. Do you think he really doesn't believe there was anything disgraceful about referring to Rawiri's facial tattoos as scribbles?
I don't know. It lands with a lot of people.
Ugh. How ugly is that?
It is so demeaning and it's so disappointing. But that kind of thing, just watching some of the feedback that's coming back after that interview too. What I really hate, Martin, I hate it when people fire shots at Winston or me for what we look like, or, you just thick as shit or whatever, that kind of stuff. I'd love people just to stick to the argument. Well, some of the stuff that's coming out now is like really, really nasty.
Yeah.
And, it is very misogynist. It's very, it's a woman. It's, all that carry on.
Yeah.
And there's some nasty stuff coming out about Winston too, which we're able to sort of try and get rid of. But yeah, it cultivates that kind of a reaction.
Winston has put the boot into Māori time and time and time again, and he's built a political brand on that. Why do you think he has such an uneasy relationship with his identity?
Well, he comes from a very strong Māori family.
Yeah.
Very respected, the Peters whānau. Of course, he in 96. I mean, he stood on a Māori seat, and way before that, 99-6, he took it all out. I'm just not quite sure what he believes in, Martin, and that was what I was trying to ask him. Like, we kind of understand what he doesn't believe in, but actually, it's unclear, because he's been 37 years in Parliament.
Right.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And he's been respected for various, his foreign affairs portfolio, how he's managed that.
Yeah.
But if you look back at it, well, we can think of the gold card. There's a lot of political capital he's had. I did ask him about what his legacy would be, and that didn't go down well.
No, it didn't.
He twisted around. But I mean, I'm saying, like, John Key's legacy was, stability, and Jacinda's was kindness. What would yours be? And that just, did not go down well at all. But it is an interesting thing to think, well, what is it at the end of the day? He's got so much. There's so much about Winston that is compelling to so many people. And he has got some wonderful skills. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens next year.
At one stage, it seemed he had become almost Trump-like in demanding you apologise for grievances he's got about people not praising him enough. Did that feel strange as a journalist?
Well, I was kind of just sort of thinking, are you serious? What are you doing? He got, I thought he was, well, I just kind of like, I'm just skeptical all the time. And he kind of looked like he was really, really angry. And then I'm thinking, I'm just processing and thinking, actually, I didn't say that.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And people can see that I didn't say that. No, some people can see that I didn't say that. But it's an opportunity, I guess, to position, for the interviewee to position themselves as being got at, being a victim, being unfairly attacked, when actually all you're trying to do as the interviewer is like ask the question.
Yeah. Was he as gruff when the cameras stopped rolling? I mean, do you think it was an act, or was he really that obtuse?
No, he was fine when the cameras stopped rolling, and there were bits of time on there when he was fine.
Yeah.
He just has these moments, and I'm thinking, what's going on there? It's like you're standing outside the situation. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. He is as I say, he's a very challenging person to interview. And yeah, it's all go now. It's funny too because there was sort of little moments where he'd say something, and when I talked about how ordinary people, it's hard out there for ordinary people.
Yeah.
And he was basically saying, yes, well, Acton National, they paraphrasing, but they didn't see the writing on the wall, but we did, or they underestimated it, but we didn't. I thought, we're just distancing ourselves a little here. We're on our campaign trail. So
finally, how do you keep asking the hard questions to one of New Zealand's oldest and most cunning politicians, and do it with such professionalism?
Well, Martin, I look at my interviews and I think, I should have asked that. Oh, man, I should have hit him back with that, All I can see is the kind of bits where I didn't, do as well as I could. But it's so difficult when you're in the moment.
Totally.
And I would say that with Winston Peters and David Seymour are the two most, you would agree,
Yes,
the two
yes.
most difficult people to interview.
Yeah.
And you can stand back afterwards and go, damn, I should have hit him with that one. But it's over Clover.
I think it was one of the most important political interviews of the year, and we're so grateful that you did it. Thank you, comrade. You can see Moana's amazing interview with Winston in full on Māori TV. Good luck. We hope to have you on the show again soon.
Kia ora, Martin. All the best.
Be well. Thank you. Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is the only reason you would buy a subscription to the New Zealand Herald. Militant cyclist and Auckland visionary NZME columnist Simon Wilson. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome back to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
I'm just going to say something that will drop a bomb on everything.
Oh, here we go.
Architecture.
Oh, that's it. I wasn't expecting
Did not see that coming.
Wasn't there? Tell us why.
I'm referring to Chris Bishop, who got up at the local government conference earlier this month and told councillors, I have a message for you. Message was his word. And the message was, you've got to stop trying to win awards. You've just got to get into building things that are cost efficient and effective and forget about chasing good design.
Oh, Jesus.
So I've written about this for tomorrow in the Herald. I'm just doing a little plug here.
Yes.
Because good design is about cost efficiency. It is about how do you make things work properly so they are functional and highly effective.
Yes.
It is how you achieve the goals that Chris Bishop says he wants to achieve. And at the same time, if you win awards for it, well, that's all the better.
Preach.
We have in this city, in Auckland, a fantastic lineup of all sorts of bridges, buildings, public spaces that have been well designed, function well, and elevate the city. And I've gone through a long list of them, and it's just astonishing that we have this barbarians at the gate syndrome that is crushing in on us.
We'll talk about that a little bit later. Our next panellist is the coolest Gen X journalist in New Zealand. Forget Mikey Havoc, forget Russell Brown, forget Noel McCarthy. The greatest was always Auckland business editor for the Post. Dita Boni, kia ora, comrade. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Martin.
One word to describe the week, please.
Can I just preface this by saying I did not realise you were anti-Santa and feeling a bit shook
If
by
you'd
that.
known. Oh, okay.
Mark's a standing centre. That's
A little
right.
bit shook. I think the word of the week is weather. While the government's been talking about silly things like changing passport covers and getting rid of scaffolding, which was the basis of that non-announcement, climate change continues to close in on us. And where is the attention? Where's the Minister for Auckland? Where's the Mayor?
Yeah.
I mean, always.
Yeah.
But, this is what we are dealing with every single day. It's not just Auckland, obviously. It's top of the South Island. Let's focus on the important things. So I think weather, climate change, and inattention is what I would say.
Preach. Our next panellist is a mother of 8, a high-ranking Jedi Knight, and the left's last great hope. She's House of Gryffindor with a lightsaber. Labour Party finance spokesperson Barbara Edmonds. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome back to the show. One word to describe the week, please.
Malole soifua manuia, energised. We've had a full week of campaigning by Penny Henare for Tamaki Makaurau. I have obviously based in Wellington, but watching our crews on the ground doing their door knocking, seeing Penny throughout his community. Wasn't happy with the Wars losing on Saturday night. And Penny and I, that's the one sports team we both agree on. So there's some work there that needs to be done, but really energised. And then after yesterday watching Postcab, where there was a sermon on the Mount by the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister, and then today being able to smash them a bit in Parliament. Yes, I'm feeling really energetic about it.
Barbara, can I ask you, if you had to choose one, would you rather the Wars won the comp or Pine Henare won Tamaki Makaurau?
Whoa!
Well, Penny Henare winning Tamaki Makaurau means that the Wars going to win. It's a flow-on effect.
You didn't come down.
Flow-on effect.
And last but certainly not least, replacing the Mad Dog this evening, she is Wātea's press gallery journalist. Sweet Jesus, she had an incredible interview with Luxon at the beginning of this week, which we will get into in our first issue. Claudette Hauiti, thank you so much for joining us. One word to describe the week, please.
Yeah, fast and furious, and it's not over yet. Well, it's only Tuesday, but fast and furious. There we go. Three kupu.
Okay, comrades, let's get into this evening's show. Political panel topics are issue 1. Is the economy now in recession, and what's the government's response? Issue 2. Even Judith Collins is worried about government's voter suppression policy. And issue 3 tonight, 23 new laws having the treaty stripped out of them. Yay! More divisive, race-baiting hatred. Just what Aotearoa New Zealand needed. Let's begin tonight with the latest stats on our imploding economy. 28,000 jobs gone, 70,000 Kiwis fleeing the country in an exodus to Australia, food inflation outstripping wages, homelessness exploding, and business investment is now so weak that banks have not lent any net new money to non-landlord businesses and farmers since May of last year. Barbara, these stats are the bitter harvest of this government's 2024 cutbacks. This is not borrowing from the last government. This is the fruit of their ideological experiment. When do voters realise they've been duped?
I think they already started to understand that. And I represent an area in Wellington and Porirua, in an area with this high deprivation. But actually what I'm hearing is not just from that area that they're in pain. I'm hearing it on the side of the netball court. I'm hearing it when I'm at the shopping mall with the kids. And then when I'm here in Auckland, I'm also hearing from Aucklanders saying, hey, everyone keeps talking about the pain in Wellington economically, but what about the pain here? So I'm hearing it throughout different areas of the country, and I don't think, I know that the Prime Minister and the National League government are just out of touch with it because they're saying, well, growth. However, this is the problem with GDP.
Yeah.
It's not, you can measure GDP and it looks like there's growth, which there is, because technically we're not in a recession. However, unemployment is high. We've lost 30,000 people, 30,000 jobs, 18,000 construction sector roles, and you went through those statistics before.
Were you taken aback by the sermon from the Mount there this week? Because these numbers came out and the government's response was to come forward and say, oh, well, look at all these things we've done and things aren't that bad. But people are really feeling it now. Has the government become that out of touch in just 18 months?
There's a difference between saying, I know families are struggling, and saying, I've been through that struggle. Right? And there's a slight difference there. So again, when the Prime Minister says he's got 60, his food budget is $60, well, how many blocks of butter is that going to pay for these days? But families out there, and the ones I'm talking to, and it's right throughout different parts of the country, it's painful.
Yeah.
And when you've got families who traditionally might have worked one job, they've had to take a second, had to take a third, Again, in my area where the government service is the number one employer, followed by the construction sector, I'm seeing it quite harshly in our side.
Claudette, you had an incredible interview with the Prime Minister, Chris Luxon, this week. But Bernard Hickey noted it as the most important interview to watch this week. You challenged the Prime Minister on the 6,000 kids in Tito Tokoro that don't have, that are living beneath the breadline and living in freezing conditions. What was his response to your criticism?
Oh, look, we know that the cost of living is biting into everyday New Zealanders' pockets. In fact, that corridor post cab was 12 and a half minutes long between him and Minister Finance, Nicola Willis. He started off, the first line of his corridor to post cab was, cost of living is without doubt the key issue for all New Zealanders, and I know it's stuck in my head. Outside of the noise of what happens here in Wellington, across the world, people go to bed at night and wake up in the morning thinking about paying their mortgage and paying their rent. No, sorry, Prime Minister, people don't have a bed to go to. There's a kuia and her mokopuna underneath duvets in a car in a freedom camping site. 6,000 tamariki who are jammed into sheds, not tents, because it's too bitterly cold for them. And we know it's 6,000 because the community, kaiawhina, are counting them. And then we get Tamapōtaka telling me on the tiles that we're not actually really sure that that's actually the number. And Claudette, you need to go out onto the street. So, you know, I mean, I know I've gone slightly down the track here, but in terms of the Prime Minister and his response to me, my partai was, it had come straight off the back of, you have given the board members an 80% increase in fees for being on boards. And that's when I jumped in and I said, you know, off the back of that, how can you possibly do that and talk about the policies that are impacting, that are advantaging our whānau when we've got a kuia and her mokopuna in a freedom camping site, when we've got 6,000 tamariki into Tai Tukaro jammed into sheds. How can you possibly say that your policies are working? And then, of course, he waxed lyrical about the drop in interest rate and then about the mortgages. These people don't have a mortgage. The reason why they don't have a mortgage is because they don't have a whare. They don't even have a whare to rent, you know, let alone try and figure out how to pay for their rent. Can I just go back to Barbara on the same topic? Last week in the House, when Barbara stood up and she asked a question around the cost of living and the prices of groceries to Minister Willis, and Minister Willis said to her, yeah, I see that it's really tough. And then you're looking at some of our wahine in the opposition, and we know that they don't see it. They actually live it, you know. So we've got families who are living it, and we've got the government saying to us, yeah, I see that's kind of hard. It just, you know, it just doesn't sit comfortably with me any longer.
The Prime Minister answered your criticisms and your questions by saying and pointing out that, whilst we've removed 6,000 people off the emergency housing wait list, but if you looked at the Salvation Army report that came out, they're saying that there has been an increase by MSD of rejections for emergency housing of 386%. How can they claim that they're solving a problem when really they're just redefining it and they're saying, well, you're no longer eligible for this category? Aren't they simply throwing people onto the street?
They are throwing people onto the street, literally, and we're hearing that from the likes of Lani Hunt, who kai awhina from Ngāmotu in New Plymouth, who's working with those in freedom campers like our kuia and her mokopuna, like Aaron Hendley on the streets working with our rangatahi, who tell us at Wātea that they have rangatahi turning up to their door soaked through to the bone from the rain and the bitter cold, because they've got nowhere else to go. And the reason why they've got nowhere else to go is because they've been turfed out of emergency accommodation. And let's face it, nobody wants those types of accommodation, but what else where else are they to go? Again, Minister Tamapoutaka, Associate Minister of Housing, he says that they've gone into stable houses. And I say to him, but where are they?
Yeah.
Where are they? When the likes of, Lani Hunt, even Julie Clark this morning on Wātea, again from the Love Soup Kitchen in Rotorua, they're saying they are finding those individuals and those whānau lots, including tamariki, those that have been turfed out, have not been given accommodation because there just isn't accommodation.
Dita, you have been reporting that the government stands to gain $1 billion from selling New Zealand citizenships. Doesn't the current economic desperation drive this government to approve all those applications?
Yes, I think it does. And I mean, it points to everything that's been mentioned so far, which is they are talking to their constituency, people who get up and have to pay their mortgage. As Claudette says, that's not the whole constituency. I have been talking to businesses in the last little while. Obviously, survive till 25 has become get through to 26 because the downtime is now predicted by Kiwibank, at least in Auckland, to be taking up to 2 years. So they were thinking by the end of this year. Originally, that was at the beginning of the year, it was all about end of this year will be better. Now it's going to be at least, up to 2 years that things get better. So Kiwibank put out this regional note, which I think is quite interesting, and it talks to some of these things. They said Otago and Southland are doing the best, right? Right. And we all think, dairy prices must be that. It's actually tourism that is driving that. It's not equally distributed. And even Otago and Southland get 5 out of 10 for their indicators. So things like their retail figures, their tourism figures, their building consents, that kind of thing. 5 out of 10, as Jared Kerr said, is still really bad.
Follow-up question. What are the political and social ramifications of allowing 200 multi-millionaires to buy citizenship in New Zealand?
Well, it's just creating more of an unequal society, isn't it, really? And for anyone who doesn't really believe in trickle-down economics, it sort of allows people to have a safe haven in New Zealand without maybe contributing much. Because there's certain various rules that they've tried to bring in that make people invest into businesses, but there are ways of getting around that, and there's not enough of the businesses in some cases to invest in. So this money can go into managed funds and things like that. That's not going to be seen by the average person. Right.
Simon, on one hand, Matua Winston is damning immigration. On the other hand, he is softening up the overseas investment rules. Are his voters smart enough to notice the hypocrisy?
I don't know that they are. We heard Moana earlier this evening say that she didn't think that was something that was really registering. And I think really immigration is the kind of thing that people voting for Winston might like to get upset about. But there are more core issues right now, and cost of living is top of the list. Can I just say that you quoted the figure of 28,000 jobs lost. The one that I find really frightening is that 18,000 jobs have gone in the construction sector.
Oh, yeah.
Think about what that means. That means, as we know, construction has ground to a halt, largely, particularly in housing. So the ability to do the most fundamental thing we need to bring people out of poverty, to have a more functional society and education and health and all the rest, which is to house people properly.
Yes.
That ability has been profoundly undermined.
Right.
That's the first thing. Secondly, there's the general economic impact of it. And beyond that, we've heard for years in this country that Labour lost the working man, the Waitakere man, or whatever you wanted to call him, the tradie, the guy with the ute. Yeah.
How's he feeling now?
These are the people who have lost their jobs.
That's right.
So if it's true they were not as strong for Labour as they had been a generation earlier, it now must be coming true that they are also not strong for National, which means where are they going to go if they're not leaving the country? Yeah. And I think that's pretty dangerous too. If the mainstream parties are not able to attract those kinds of voters, they will go to the fringe.
Yes.
And they will go to the fringe with pretty devastating
Follow-up question. The Salvation Army homelessness report out today shows MST rejections of applications for emergency housing rose 386% in the last last year. 14 in every 1,000 people lived in uninhabitable situations, and 1 in 1,000 was living without shelter. The Prime Minister's response, when challenged on these stats, was to double down on austerity budgets and cutbacks, saying more was needed. A multi-millionaire with a Hawaiian batch who just came home from holiday lecturing the homeless that there must be more cutbacks seems a tad uncouth, doesn't it?
Well, I know Helen Robinson, the City Missioner in Auckland. I've worked with her, and I know she says it's never been worse in her experience. And she's been there, not as City Missioner, but she's been on their staff working there a long time. It is a really big crisis that we have now. And I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, the way in which housing had been closed down in Mount Roskill.
Yes.
And it not only means that people moved away having been told they would get houses and would be able to come back and keep their kids in the school and so on. Not only is that all destroyed, but the community that remained has also been undermined and destroyed because the cohesion is gone as well. These are really profound effects, and they will take a long time to turn around. But the longer we don't address it directly
the worse
and
it gets,
build more houses, the worse it will get.
Quick round. Māori unemployment is 10.5%. Māori youth unemployment is 19%. Where will it be at the end of this year, Barbara?
It'll definitely be higher. And doing a bit of work to see, well, if we've just had record net migration, right? We've had huge numbers leave the country. Imagine how much larger the unemployment figures would be if those people had stayed on shore, right?
Yeah.
So my view is they will be high. Pacific numbers are up there as well. They're at 9% as well.
Claudette, what are we going to be expecting at the end of the year?
So my whānau on the streets with their calculators and their abaci, we worked out that the unemployment rate for rangatahi Māori will be up at around 25%, from 19 to bump it up to 25%. Now, I asked that of Minister Louise Upston in Parliament, and of course, and she's quite rightly, pushed back on those numbers because she hadn't seen it in any official data. But, this is coming from those advocacy groups who are seeing that, the fallout from those trade training schemes that were once under the former Labour government. Actually, they really did start under Lashley, and then Labour picked it up and really ran with them. So we've seen a fallout of them. Now, some of them are actually still in that, in their studies, but they're coming to an end. So we're having to count them as well too. So currently they're in the package of, the NEETs where they're in education. And so they haven't been factored into that 19%. So by the time they finish at the end of this year and at the end of next year, when it comes to the end of these studies, we will be up well past 20%.
Dita?
It's going to be, I agree with Claudette, that's where it will be. And what it will mean is a large influx of students going into polytechnics, which have just had their funding taken away. And so what a smart government, I think, would do right now is pump money into that training sector, as well as universities and anywhere, taking advantage, mopping up those people that are going to be without jobs.
Simon?
I agree with that entirely. Yeah, it has to be done through upskilling. And it has to be done in a comprehensive and completely committed way.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 2 tonight, and that is the bewildering new voter suppression act that the government are ramming through that will prevent voters enrolling in the last 2 weeks of the next election. This impacts 600,000 special votes, most of which are overwhelmingly go to the left. When challenged on this voter suppression act, the Deputy Prime Minister called those voters, and I quote, drop kicks. Claudette, when the political Medusa that is Judith Collins is calling these voter suppression powers discriminatory, shit just got real.
Absolutely, but of course, they had also had, advice from from her, Judith, that gang patches were, breached human rights as well too, and they decided to ignore that. It's not uncommon for governments to ignore that kind of advice, but it is very telling that they have consistently not taken the advice of that person that should be listened to when it comes to all things judicial. Now, and on that dropkick thing, so I tried to do something really light today on the tiles because I had such a pody day yesterday. And, I asked, Minister Stanford if she'd actually, was there ever a time where she didn't pay her IRD on time or her warrant of fitness on time? And of course she says, yes, of course, doesn't everybody? And Matt Ducey, whether he did, and he said, oh, of course, and I said, well, you two do know that you're officially drop kicks, because what Seymour had said was anybody that doesn't follow the law and doesn't follow the rules, you're all drop kicks. Well, every single one of the MPs, 120 something of them, they're all drop kicks. Every single one of us are. So the question that I did ask the Prime Minister last week was, does he agree? Actually, no, it was yesterday.
Yes.
Does he agree with his deputy leader that over 100,000 New Zealanders are drop kicks simply because they have life pressures, life stuff to carry on with? And he said that he wouldn't characterise them like that. It's not a term that he would use. But he fell absolutely short of saying that he would reprimand the Deputy Prime Minister. Now, what this also highlights for me is that they're all coming under a lot of pressure, because while polls are polls, the general trend of the last 3 polls have shown that they are slipping down behind the opposition. And it's weighing heavy on them, and it's weighing tough. Also, too, now we're talking about Winston Peters. We are seeing that he's really coming into his own, and he is not holding back on any of the criticisms that are around his coalition partners, and particularly that young lad, David Seymour. He's given it to him left, right and centre. So I think there's a little bit of tension there.
Dita, these voter suppression powers takes New Zealand all the way back to 2003. We are winding back universal suffrage by almost quarter of a century. These kinds of voter suppression tactics would make Alabama blush, wouldn't they?
Yeah. I mean, the question is voting a right? Is voting a right? If it is. If speed is of the essence, then I think you could argue that politicians should also be upfront about the alliances they're going to make and have those ready to go when they're voted, rather than we wait for 2 weeks for them to make a government.
Right. Follow-up question. The good news is that rich people who want to donate anonymously have had their amount raised from 5,000 to 6,000. And isn't that the kind of democracy we want to gerrymander?
It's the kind of democracy you want to give the people who vote for you.
Simon, the government are purposely rigging the election and no one is calling it that. Why not?
Well, you just did.
I'm the only one so far.
This is the place, isn't it? I thought the most frightening thing I've heard in this thing is not the dropkicks remark. It's Todd Stevenson, the MP in the ACT Party, who said that if we continue to give people who just turn up to enrol and vote on the day they vote, then they're just going to be, and I'm paraphrasing him here, they're just going to be voting to tax, to raise taxes to spend other people's money. In other words, he's thinking about it in terms of his own party policies.
Yep. Right.
Your right to vote is determined by the degree to which you think like an ACT voter. That is an appalling transgression in democracy, and really, really quite frightening.
Yeah, eye-opening, isn't it?
I mean, if you look at it, it ought to be easier to vote.
Right.
The only thing is it should be easier. We should be looking always for ways to make it easier. There's full stop.
Yeah.
Just full stop.
I agree.
Voting as well.
Yeah. Well, there's that. And secondly, if on the right they think that none of the late voters, or very few or too few of the late voters are going to vote for them, maybe they need to think about why.
Right. Follow-up question. The government of the day requires a supermajority of 75% to make changes as significant as this. Why are they being allowed to pretend they have a supermajority when they don't? They don't have a supermajority. They did the exact same bullshit with the prisoner voting, right? And that went back to the High Court because they didn't have a 75% majority.
Well, I think it's a good example of something we see an awful lot in our politics, which is people waving flags going, look at me, vote for me. I'm saying the things you want to hear. I'm now starting to say the things out loud that you just didn't used to get said out loud before. Yeah, and that's consuming a lot of our politics now.
Barbara, the vast amount of those who are impacted by this are our young people, Māori, Pacifica and Asian communities. how is hurting their democratic engagement better for New Zealand when there is already so much cynicism towards our institutions?
Well, that's the ironicness of the ACT Party and the Deputy Prime Minister. And again, I say that the Deputy Prime Minister's comments, right? They always go on around their flag saying New Zealand should be one. Well, then give everybody the opportunity to vote. If you know that a big chunk of your demographic is going to be not have the same access to vote, then why are you making it harder?
Yeah.
But if I go back to Claudette's earlier point around the ability for families to make ends meet and the way the opposition, she said about the opposition woman, we've been through it. I've been that family that slept in one room because it was really cold to heat the house. I've been that family that we sweat when we go take the car for a warrant because we're hoping it's not going to cost something to pay to fix it. Families have, particularly now in a cost of living crisis, and we've heard indicators say that this is going to go on, to the end of next year. When you've got a really small bandwidth, right, your focus is on getting food on the table, getting your kids to school, getting them the healthcare that they need, or maybe looking after your parents because now you're living with your parents because none of you can afford your own home. And so we should be making it as easy as possible. So things like when we had voting booths at the shopping malls,
right?
Where people go.
Yes.
And where people have, in schools, where they're trusted community hubs.
Yeah.
We should be looking actively for policies like that as opposed to just sort of waving a flag of we all should be one in the country, but actually when you're that far behind in the start line, then I'm just going to rear ahead and never mind, you'll just catch up when you catch up.
Follow-up question, how are these 600,000 voters who voted over this 12-day period plus the day of election, how are those 600 and I'm quoting the Deputy Prime Minister here, how are they drop kicks? How are they drop kicks?
I think you need to have a look in the mirror. And again, to Claudette's point, and it was a very good exercise that she did, asking politicians whether the Mr. Tax Bill, Mr. Warren Fitness, Mr. Ruck Bill, whatever. Yeah, he needs to have a look in the mirror.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight. And just when you thought it was safe to go back to the marae, the government have identified the 23 laws that New Zealand First want to strip out of the treaty. Simon, yay, more divisive race baiting hatred. Just what Aotearoa New Zealand needed, eh?
Yeah, there's a narrative around the government that the National are intent on pursuing their own policies and they're not too fussed about the policies that ACT and New Zealand First are forcing on them unless they actively undermine National's own policies. And there is a certain degree of logic to that, but National has done so little to impede the ACT Party in particular, their race baiting and their divisiveness, that you have to conclude that they are pretty happy for it to be happening. That they want to align with that sentiment rather than against it. And I think if you go back looking at Luxon with the Treaty Principles Act, everything he said when he eventually did come out and say we're not going to support it, he just kept being embarrassed about having to do it.
How will trying to strip the treaty out of 23 laws, how's that process going to go down?
How's it going to go down?
Māori won't accept it, will they? They will point blank not accept that.
Well, I think what are we looking at? We're looking at a situation where the coalition government's going to bring it on because they're the ones we're going to make look divisive. Is that the way the scenario plays out?
Barbara, every time this government attacks any suggestion that their policies are anti-treaty or anti-Māori, they then go and do some anti-treaty, anti-Māori stuff. They say they're not, but every single bloody time you go, okay, well, that was pretty terrible. Oh, no, there's this other. Oh, well, that was pretty. Oh, then is there a disconnect between what they tell us publicly and their desire to use Māori as a political punching bag?
Yeah, 2 words. Weak leadership is what it comes down to. It shows where the Prime Minister's priorities are. They're not on jobs and the cost of living, and it's basically he's bowing down to his coalition partners. We're in 2025, not 1925. Well, maybe relationships back then between Māori and settlers were better. I'm not sure. I wasn't around then, unlike other MPs who possibly could have been. But ultimately, we as a country, that's why you had 80,000 people protesting last year in November, right? We're going to have close to 1 million Māori soon, or people who identify as tangata whenua.
So
They're
Barbara,
so stuck in the past, it's quite unbelievable, but they've just got the wrong priorities because there's weak leadership.
Barbara, what do you think the Prime Minister's priorities are? If it's not cost of living, which is all he talks about, if it's clearly not
It was to
a
win.
larger sense of race, it's just that?
It was to win.
Yeah.
And get that
Just
right.
that.
Well, my view
You
is...
don't think there's an agenda that he's pursuing that this is all a part of, or this is a sideshow too?
So I was a public servant who worked under previous national governments. I might not have agreed with what they were doing, but at least I knew what they were standing for.
Right.
And I knew that they were, when I thought about Bill English and the stuff he was trying to do with social investment and the work that he had started with the wellbeing budgets, for example, that Grant Robertson then continued, I could see there was something that they were standing for. This lot, I have no idea. You know, and if I'm really frank, that's the feedback I'm getting across when I have one-to-one meetings with business people. What's the vision? What's the plan? And I'm just like, that's a question for them.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, my view is, I think they just wanted to win. They were willing to give up whatever it was to win. And then when they've come in, they don't know what they're doing, which is why the coalition partners are able to wag the dog.
And do you think that's a really big thing now? Is that what you see in their eyes now? They actually don't know what to do?
Well, I think about some of the decisions that they've made, particularly around infrastructure. So, they put the handbrake on a lot of the government construction jobs, building homes, the hospitals, they reviewed it, the school builds, they reviewed it, Kāinga Ora, they've shrunk it. And I've talked about this on the show before, and I'm not an economist, but I did do Economics 101. When the market is pulling back, that's when the government invests to smooth the economic cycle.
Right.
So what I'm saying is they're pulling back. The private sector has pulled back because of the economy performing the way that it is. So I don't know what they're trying to do. But at the moment, with the 15-minute Sermon on the Mount and basically the spin that I hear on a daily, when I questioned the Minister of Finance today on comments from the Soup Compassion Kitchen, Kibosh, the Food Network, who are all basically saying things are worse, they've never seen it as bad. I even used Helen's comments from Auckland City Mission last week and put them to the Minister of Finance. They're like, oh, well, we're just cleaning up a mess.
Did you see Fran O'Sullivan's column in the weekend? She basically argued that it would be wrong to make Fonterra have a two-tier pricing system. It would be wrong to do anything to touch Fonterra's profits. But maybe we should be looking at doing something with GST on food.
I wonder if there was a party that
I
ran
read
that.
And I thought, what?
Dita,
That to me is a suggestion of the confusion that now reigns on the right.
Dita, we saw the exact same petty bullshit with putting English first on the passport. Is there no limits to this government making Māori a political punching bag?
Yes. No, there isn't. And I think that speaks to another point, which is we are crawling out of a recession by our fingertips. The world out there is, shit's getting cray.
Yeah.
And
That's the best guess.
And here we are spending all our time revising legislation like this. For God's sakes, it is not a top priority. If it is a priority, you know what I mean? It's not even a priority.
And the excitement that Brooke had when she announced that she was removing Te Reo first and putting English first. It was like Christmas had come all in one moment for them. Yeah. Why would they celebrate such naked malice?
I think it's because, and these are the words of Paula Goldsmith, who we know as Paul Goldsmith, we've got plenty of challenges in this country, but when you look at New Zealand in the context of the globe, I think we have strong social cohesion. So they believe that getting rid of anything Māori will bring people together, when it has been proven in the Treaty Principles Bill that failed that it has the exact opposite effect.
Do you think they really believe that?
Yes, I do actually.
Right.
I think
so
people
they are
like
simply,
he believes
they're
that.
just myopic.
I don't think Christopher Luxon, for example, believes that, but I do believe there are some in National who believe it, and certainly ACT and New Zealand First seem to believe that.
Well, he ran an airline where basically Te Aoma and, and Māori pattern and Kōwhaiwhai, for example, were all over it. And they were marketing off their koru brand,
Yes.
So deep down, I don't think he does agree with it.
Claudette, isn't the issue here that Luxon is so weak he just can't say no to Seymour and Winston, and that's why race relations are melting down with political stunts like this?
So he's got a very strong coalition partner in Winston Peters, first and foremost. So whatever Winston Peters says in and around Te Ao Māori, he's going to run with it, because Winston Peters is like the next thing since sliced bread, right, when it comes to Te Ao Māori. Can I just talk about Winston there for a minute? And I just want to push back slightly on you, Bomber. It was a partai that you had said to ask Moana, and it was around Winston Peters being uncomfortable with being Māori. I don't know what the correct phrasing was. It was something like that, eh?
Yep.
I have to push back on you and say that Winston Peters knows intricately his whakapapa. He is Māori. There is no mistaking. We cannot ever criticise his Māori unique whakapapa Māori. We might not like his ideas. We might not like what he's doing. But to say that he is not Māori is just, it goes beyond the pale. Aroha mai. Please do not do that again to Winston Peters. Having said that, though, in the House, what we've got here with him and with Shane Jones is a generational gap.
Right.
And it's so glaringly obvious. So on the one hand, you've got Aotearoa with the Te Pāti Māori MPs who are bringing in this whole wave of new, innovative ideas from a kohanga reo sect. And unfortunately, Shane and Winston have been left behind, which is why you keep hearing Winston Peters talk ad nauseum about Sir Purana Ngata and Sir Paul Murray and Buck. I mean, that's pre-1925 stuff, isn't it?
Right.
He's back there. He is not Aotearoa, and he knows this, and he struggles with it, and he's trying to make himself relevant in this new world, and he's found his relevancy in Christopher Luxon, because Christopher Luxon has no idea about what Te Ao Māori is, but nor does he understand or identify with a bicultural Aotearoa New Zealand, and he's just allowing Winston Peters to get on with it because he has completely no idea.
Comrades, we need to wrap the show with a final word. Barbara, your final word this week is...
Up the waz. Come on, man. Stop breaking my heart.
Peony,
I've
surely
got
you want
to
to
stop
say.
watching these games. We're right up to the last minute, holy hecka. But ultimately, I'm in Parliament, most days, and when I hear the rhetoric coming, or the narrative coming from the government benches, they need to stop governing for the 8% and the margins. They are meant to govern for everybody.
Right.
And the actions in which they are basically portraying, both in their words and what they're doing, and the disconnect they have with the general public, and a big chunk of the general public are in pain, just shows to me that they're not fit for government, and it's time for us to kick them out in the next election.
Preach. Dita, your final word this week.
Someone mentioned Aaron Hendry, and I just wanted to say who works with rangatahi in Auckland, homeless rangatahi. He does such a fantastic job, and this man is pushing the proverbial uphill, obviously, in this environment, and with the council that they've got, with the mayor that they've got. So I just wanted to shout out to him. I think he does a great job.
Claudette, your final word this week?
Oh, yeah, well, I've got three really quick ones. One is Dita de Boni. I'm a big fan.
That's what I said.
Great.
I said that too.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you were fangirling here. And if I was in the studio, I'd ask for your autograph.
Oh, my
so
goodness.
That one.
I'll get it for you,
She's
Claudette.
great.
I'll get it for you.
Time for everything.
Yeah, Cool. And the second thing is I do want everybody in Māori to get out and vote come September the 6th. Early vote is August the 25th. It's really exciting. 2 really high caliber candidates. Fantastic. Get out to vote. And the third thing is not because I think that Barbara Edmonds is going to be the next best thing since sliced bread when Labour comes into government. But what I do want to say is they look like a government in waiting. They are not sitting ready to perch, ready to take over that government ship. They are standing ready to launch through that door.
Really looking forward to your coverage of the Tamaki Makaurau by-election debate on the 20th, I think, of next month. You will be fantastic. Claudette, Simon, your final word. My final word. Today, Trump and the EU announced that they had signed a free trade deal. That's right. We don't know what the details are yet. China, the EU signed another deal recently, which is with China over emissions. Yes. And the really fascinating thing about this is that they have said the rest of the world, meaning America, is not going to do its part, so we are going to have to address this. And it is complicated because China, on the one hand, is still building coal-fired plants, but on the other hand, China has more wind power now than the rest of the world put together. Yes. Enormous changes there. So China is not on the track you might want them to be on, but they are moving towards it. So is the EU. So there is significant action now happening in the world, or going to happen, I think, in relation to the climate, and we need to be part of it. Amazing point. Thank you, comrades. And now to my final word. Brothers and sisters, tonight I'd like to focus on the end to card surcharges and why National's solution is the most stupid. Now, before I kick the crap out of this, let's celebrate the tiny win. Yay, people too posh to push buttons, and those using credit cards to pay for food won't be screwed over every single time they buy something. In a cost of living crisis like we're all experiencing right now, every saved cent matters. So good on the government for making this tiny, almost insignificant to the pain we face, tiny change. Now, let's kick the crap out of it. Firstly, it doesn't come into effect until May next year, so its announcement now is little more than a promise for a tiny change in the future while we bleed out right now on the supermarket floor. National takes today what their tomorrow never brings. Secondly, why the hell are we putting the charge on the retailers and hospitality? You ask anyone in retail or hospo right now how tough it is, and they are hurting bad. We've all seen the empty shops. We all know how tough our brothers and sisters in retail and hospo are doing it right now. So adding an additional cost to them is like throwing a drowning person an anvil. Why the hell is it impossible for this government to put the true cost on those that create it? Just like with the polluters, instead of ensuring those that are creating the cost pay for it, the government makes the cost a user pays charge rather than tax the one causing the problem. It's not the retailers or hospo or consumers who should be forced to take on the cost. It's the bloody banks who have created PayWave cards with a $200 threshold, which is highly exploitable. Make the banks pay. Make the banks who have billion-dollar profits pay. Make the banks who have created a pinless card system that is highly exploitable to theft pay, not the retailers or hospo or the customer. Why is National incapable of making their rich mates pay for the social cost their rich mates' products create? Stop being chumps. Demand the banks pay. Comrades, we need to be kinder to individuals and far crueler to corporations. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Wātea News. After the show, the Bradbury Group enjoys conviviality at 165 Ponsonby Road. Why not pop down, meet the show staff and plot the revolution? That's 165 Ponsonby Road. Tuesday night drinking at its best. Everything on the show is an opinion and shouldn't be taken seriously enough to attempt defamation action against us. We were joking. We're never serious about anything. And officially, a small weta in Avondale is legally the owner. Good luck finding him. Don't forget to follow, like and comment.